is my being a tiger person ominous in some way? Did you notice a tiger person and go, oh my God, it's a tiger? Like, what do I do when you first found me?
I probably, yes and no. On an unconscious level, I believe I was like assured of your caliber by the fact that of all the animals you could have selected, you selected a tiger.
So what is it about tigers?
I've just always loved them. They've been my favorite big cat since I was a kid, and I probably like moved away from them a little bit because I'm an Aquarius and we are contrarians. And so whenever I get the sense that something is like the normie choice, this was especially prominent in me when I was a kid. It's less so now, but like I was like, oh, tigers are too normal because like zoo books were big, and I got this like zoo book with this huge tiger, so fucking awesome. But I was like, okay, we have to like a more esoteric big cat now. So
Right,
like
because
snow
the lion is
leopard.
sure, like the lion is sort of the mainstream cat, and so the tiger is the sort of loner alternative.
Right. So I thought I was being esoteric enough by liking the tiger, but I eventually wandered even further into the alternative big cat category,
Uh-huh.
but it's always been tiger in my heart. So, yeah.
I'm interested in your lifelong relationship with favorite animals or favorite objects or symbols of any kind, because it seems to sort of lead to the kinds of divination practice that you have built up your whole life, but starting in a very universal human child behavior of like picking favorites. And I want to know
Yeah.
more about how that went for you, and like how conscious of that you have been.
This is such a good like prompt because I think about this a lot, but have never really like discussed it. Um yeah, the I feel like I've always felt like as a kid, like right, like that picking your favorite thing of something was like this massive like choice that was like super important.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I would always get really like anxious about these decisions. I feel like a lot of people, especially my like prominently Leo placemented friends, are always just like, I don't understand this level of consternation about like deciding how you're like expressing yourself. And I'm like, but I think that things are symbols of other things. And I
Yeah.
think that even though I didn't have this language at all when I was a kid, I think there was like a big part of me that was like, okay, like this is my identity that we're doing right now. This is like going to be my like avatar in the field of animals, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
who am I,
Uh-huh.
right?
So is it about sort of the density of meaning of that creature? Like, are you learning about the behaviors and manners and diets and sleep habits of that and mating habits of those creatures as a way of sort of reflecting some inner condition?
Like now, yes, I will do a lot of information and learning about like a specific habit or like behaviors of the animal to like
Yeah.
understand the self. But as a kid, I think it was like fully on vibes.
Yes.
I was just like the tiger vibe is my vibe. Like look at all that orange, like
Yeah.
incredible.
Yes. Orange and black. How can you not? Uh,
And black. It's the Halloween animal. Like
that's a very good point. Here's a question, Hawk. What's the difference between information and vibes?
vibes are information that are too well, I have multiple answers to this question.
Great.
Okay, vibes are information,
Uh-huh.
period. I think that when we say information, we think about things that are a lot more discrete, like packets that can be sort of circumscribed by a linguistic description.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a vibe, like calling something a vibe, is in and of itself telling the listener that that it defies linguistic
Uh-huh.
circumscription. It's just a vibe.
Does all information contain vibes?
Does all information contain vibes? Yes, I believe so.
Mm.
I believe that it's possible to talk about vibes as like the underpinning situation of information. Like okay, so like vibration. That's boring. I don't want to talk about vibration. But like, okay, so I was just reading Vivekananda's interpretation of Patanjali, right? And he talks about how like the syllable om, right? And how language has like when you get really good words for things, it's because the language, like the words themselves, are reflective structurally in the way that they literally vibrate the air and inside your mouth of the underlying meaning of the thing, right? So, like, the symbol represents the referent. Is that the right word? So I feel like you can have information vibe correspondence like that. Like if you do a really spectacular job describing something or like putting something into words, it can be indistinguishable from the vibe, right? You lose nothing. There's this lossless communication.
Sure.
Or
lossless enough for, I guess that's what lossless means. Like in signal processing terms, lossless means imperceptibly lost. Like there's you've done enough to convey the whole thing. It doesn't have to be like an infinite encapsulation or a complete identity.
Right. And one of the things about omens is I feel like it is a waypoint between vibes and information, like vibes and discrete description and language.
In our scenes, sometimes vibes are used pejoratively as a way of describing undisciplined practice of divination. Right. And I'm very interested in you positioning omens as an intermediary between pure vibes and pure information.
The vibe, pure lands.
Yes, the pure land of vibes, and like the like hungry ghost realm of information with no vibes. So
zero vibes, yeah. only mathematics.
Right, exactly. So and then what that realm probably like wraps back around in some hidden like occult dimension somewhere.
That's the promise of the like, oh, the universe is just math, people, is that like you can actually rid yourself of vibes in their entirety by using this perfect language of description.
Yes. But so failing that, it seems like maybe this is what you're saying. I want to ask if this is what you're saying. Like omens are an intermediary medium. Like medium is exactly the way. I mean, it's funny because like the medium is often used to refer to the person who is receiving
and the point
omen.
Between two things.
Yeah,
the intermediary.
Right. So is that the importance of understanding and relating to omens in your own, let's just for now say like your own personal spiritual life? Like, is it a way to sort of draw yourself into the middle between these two ways of operating?
Yeah. So I think I started from, I wanted more information than vibes could give me, than just pure vibes. I'm not like a psychic, or at least I did not at all start that way in my spiritual practice. I didn't get a lot of like free info, right, from the vibes lands. So like, whereas like some people I feel like are constantly like channeling bullshit and they're just like randomly like fully on vibes, like getting info and stuff like that. But I wanted something more concrete, and I needed something more concrete to make like information actually feel real to me. And so I started with animal omens as like a way to do that, because there was just like a lot of people doing it. People have been doing it for a really long time.
Sure.
And yeah, so I just like started. Normally I'm like, you're like moving through space, right? And there's this kind of like esoteric vibe of the moment, right? Like what is happening right now? Like beyond just I'm having breakfast. It's like, okay, I'm also like moving through the like flesh of the universal time stream, right? And like what is the nature of the present portion of the universal time stream? I don't want to have to necessarily like sit down and meditate to like mind meld with the moment. Like every single time I want to know what's happening. So I'm kind of like, I found that if I was seeing a lot of like eagles or something, I could like Google like, what is the deal with the eagle, right? And get really useful esoteric information about the present moment, like, and my present intersection with the present moment. And it's also super helpful for like emotional processing, because I am neurodivergent, and like I think looking inward to figure out my own emotional state has always been really challenging for me. And once I realized that I could low-key just like solicit the cosmos for information about like where am I currently and get it, and then like journal about it, and it's way more interesting anyway because it's animals now. Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible vibes.
The thing I want to ask you about in terms of how those things show up is the relationship between the omen and like sequence. I mean, I guess the word most people would use would be like synchronicity. What I mean is like repetition of symbols. Like I mean, really, I guess salience. Like how does an omen jump out as salient to you? I think a lot of people see it over and over again and they go, oh, this must be a message from the universe. And that's what I mean by synchronicity. But I don't want to assume that's what it is. Like how do you notice the significance of one thing out of like the infinite time stream at any given slice?
You don't kind of. Unfortunately, it is just like a nonstop onslaught of information, and all of it is relevant and pertinent. It's kind of like trying to have a conversation with somebody who literally never stops making sounds. But no, I mean, repetition is one way.
Mm-hmm.
That is popular.
Yes, right.
As a way to detect whether or not something is significant. And it makes sense too. If someone's talking to you and they say something that doesn't really matter, they're not going to repeat themselves. They're just gonna be like, oh, never mind, it's not a big deal. But if you're talking to someone that's like, no, I literally need an answer to this, they're gonna like keep saying it until you like hear them.
Sure. That makes total sense. It seems like though, then if it's constant and it's everything and you could pick any of it, then there must be a choice that you have to make somewhere.
Yes, but also but continuing the metaphor of someone having a conversation with you, it's like the other way that I feel like it gets really emphasized is if someone makes direct eye contact with you before speaking. Does that make sense? You can have the repetition one if you're not really paying attention, but like, so like when I changed my name to Hawk like in 2021, and I had a lot of Hawk stuff my entire life. Love Hawk, solid, amazing animal.
Yes.
But when I was finally like, I'm actually going to do this. Is this the name? A hawk burst out of the bushes next to where my car was and flared its wings directly in front of my car windshield and then like flew off. And so like that to me felt like a look at me, you know?
Yeah.
And even though there hadn't really been many hawk synchronicities surrounding that moment, except for me just like thinking I was going to change my name to Hawk, it was like that was a direct emphasized moment of icon, and you can just use discernment to tell whether or not something's important. It's like taking notes, you know, like the lecturer is talking, but it's like you can like figure out like what part of this might actually relate to me. Like, what do I need to write down?
That is a way better answer to the question than anything about like some kind of mental choice happening. It's just like it's like a perceptual layer. But I also want to point out that hawks landing on your windshield and flaring their wings at you is not something that happens abundantly often to people.
No.
So I want to know, and like this is like that is of course a rather crazy one.
I picked a very loud one. It was like, I mean, it was loud enough to change the entire signifier by which I refer to my personhood. And you know what I mean?
Yes, that'll do it. But I also feel like I do hear from you fairly often about like super crazy ones that are not, I mean, like I feel like I get pretty weird omens too. Like that's why we hang out. But like I guess what I want to know is like, do you think that there is any kind of attractive force to this communication that you are partaking of in any way?
Yeah. And I think what you said about the choice actually is like really real. Like there is, I think, asking for it by like name, being like, I would like to receive the omens. Please give me the signs, give me the symbols all the time. Like I spent like my lifetime as an occult practitioner, which is 10 years now, like begging God for signs. And like I get a bunch of them because of that. I feel like persistent request. Yeah, I have a 9th house moon too for the astrology nerds. So I think that like that's the place where divination and like omens from God happen. And so I have a big receptive satellite disc like, or dish rather, like
Yeah.
sitting up there
Yeah.
being like, please put the signs in the bowl.
Mhm. Yes.
And God is like, sure,
Uh-huh.
I will.
Cool. So there's yeah, so you're partaking in it on purpose and have been for a long time.
Yeah. And I don't feel like this happened to me before I was doing that. It wasn't really like that. I did
Mm.
get like one crazy I have like I can think of one insane synchronicity that happened, but I didn't even register it thusly
Uh-huh.
because I was not in the mind space. Like if you don't have the bowl to
Right.
catch the juice in,
Yeah.
it's just gonna like flow over the windshield, as it were, to completely mix metaphors.
Well, I mean, I was at the beginning trying to connect your sort of childhood favorite animals to this as a way of looking for like a primordial aptitude that you might have had all along. And I just wonder, like, it's interesting to hear you say that that wasn't such a big thing before you started asking for it.
Yeah, but it's inclination, right? Like
Uh-huh.
there's this like desperation for signifiers that I think was very present
Hmm.
in me, like opposed that Leo moon is an Aquarius sun, right? So it's
Yeah.
like the sun is in a place for the non-astrology heads, but like the sun is in a place like where it struggles to do traditionally solar significations,
Uh-huh.
like having a firm sense of internal identity without that being supported by your external context. So, like, I was really looking for ways to have my self understanding reflected and supported by external context. So, like, deciding what I was
Uh-huh.
going to be when I grew up and stuff. Like, I needed all these pieces,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like, pieces of flair, like little patches on my jacket when I got older, and like all this stuff, like supporting pieces for my identity.
Yeah.
And I was like really into personality tests and like all these things, anything that would spit back out a reflection
Hmm.
that was like, this is who you are. And I'd be like, oh, okay. And like I could decide whether I agreed with it or not and like use that as like a strut to like hold up my self understanding.
Oh, nice.
And then I found astrology.
Yeah. Whoops.
But yeah, so I feel like there's like the aptitude is more like desire. It's like I
Uh-huh.
really, really wanted feedback from God,
Uh-huh.
basically. And
But
I was like willing to sit there and ask for it over and over again. There probably is some degree of like luck for me personally. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, I just tried really hard and now birds talk to me.
okay, what is the difference between inner and outer? It seems like you have in two different ways over the course of this conversation like expressed not finding something in an inner space and then realizing that the outer space is abundant with it.
Mm.
What's the difference?
There's Lon Mila Duquette's answer, which is it's all in your head, but you have no idea how big your head is. I believe consciousness is an emergent property, right? The whole thing is like talking and speaking, and I am part of the whole thing, talking and speaking, but I am also an individual unit who can be talked to and spoken with. But communication is possible because we're permeable, like the inner and outer is like a semi permeable membrane. And I like that about it.